engagement there.
You're listening to Head South Radio with your host, Kat Meyer, a podcast dedicated to prioritizing pleasure and removing the stigma and shame around sex. We're here to be curious and have an open conversation about sexual health and relational wellness. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. The information discussed is not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Hi there, I'm your host, Kat Meyer, and on this episode of Head South Radio, I speak to one of my dearest friends, Bonnie Crotzer, who also happens to be the founder of the Floss, which is a fascia movement technique. On this episode, Bonnie and I discuss flossing, what it is, how to do it, as well as the benefits of flossing for the pelvic floor. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I just wanted to make a very quick note that there is some subject matter or topics that come up in the conversation that may make you feel a little bit squeamish. So just be advised, and I hope you enjoy this episode and have a great week. So to get started, Bonnie, let's talk about who you are and what you do.
I'm Bonnie, or Bon. I go by either, and I really was born to move. I think I entered this planet moving around quite a bit, and from the age of 3, when my mom put on the Brishnikov version of the Nutcracker, I couldn't stop moving. So finally they put me in dance. So very much a part of my identity is a mover. And so I fell in love with the body at a very early age, was really studying how the body moved and was so curious about that. And kind of my dance career opened into an avenue in which I wasn't meaning to, but an avenue where I deepened my studies with the body and started helping people with their bodies, teaching dance at a very young age and started teaching yoga at a very young age as well. And so kind of that self-discovery and the information and the tools I received, the miracles I received from my body, I guess I naturally wanted to share without knowing that I wanted to share it. And that's kind of opened the doors into the world of fascia, and I've become extraordinarily fascia curious and self-studied, studying with a former teacher, Bob Cooley. And yeah, I think fascia is amazing, and most people don't know about it yet. And so it's very exciting to talk about it and help people see a part of their body that they may not know about yet.
We met many years ago, and our friendship was started through me taking your class. It was a resistant stretch flossing class. And that's the first time I had heard of fascia. And I remember you explaining what it is. There's a lot of evidence coming up now. It's in its infancy of science actually studying it and respecting the fascia, from what I understand and from what you've introduced. So you were the first person I'd ever heard use the word fascia in any form. Like, it's the first time I've ever heard of that. Since then, I've now heard it more and more, especially in the work I've been doing with Head South and hearing people mention it, but it's still so new. And I consider you a very big expert and fascia curious person. Like, you're still learning, but you're also the expert in this realm for me and for a lot of people. And so can you just explain what the fascia is?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. It's a big responsibility to explain what fascia is, certainly. And like you, I went through years at the university, years of kinesiology and anatomy, and I think fascia was mentioned for 30 seconds. It was like, oh, plantar fasciitis. Oh, what's fasciitis? Oh, it has to do with fascia. No professor actually explained it. And so when I was studying under Bob Cooley and learning to manipulate it, I really learned about fascia under my hands first. And this isn't a classic myofascial technique where you massage the tissue, where we kind of like are all familiar with what our tissue feels like if we put our hands on our body. But when you engage the fascia or create resistance with the fascia, then you can experience these chains within the body. So I really learned about it through my hands and then went into a more academic studying of it. And it's nobody's fault if they haven't heard of fascia, because it's been understudied. Like you said, it's been underlooked at, and it's a key dynamic part of our body. I say it's the body's foundation because really nothing forms without the scaffolding of the fascia or the foundational threading of the fascia. I mean, you know that we're self-formed in embryo. Some people think there's some divinity involved in that. I do. I think it's quite magic how the embryo forms, but there isn't some outside force saying you do this, you do that. It's this unfolding. The only way to say it is that we're self-forming, right? And the fascia is continually the first step in which the next formation is formed as we're spiraling and folding onto ourselves. And so, as Joanne Avison says, fascia is ubiquitous and continuous. There's no part of our body really that doesn't have fascia. If you go along with some anatomists who say even down to the blood, down to the cell includes some aspect of connectiveness. Fascia means to hold fast. So if you think of the viscosity in the blood, there's that stickiness in the blood when you cut yourself open that's starting to bind. And so some anatomists consider that part of the fascial network or the connective tissue network, including the rimming of the cell wall. Like, yes, that's connecting something together. So that's included in fascia in some people's world. But for more kind of like useful day-to-day definition of fascia or how we might interface with fascia is that we've been taught that muscles and bones hold us up, but that's actually not true, because what happens if bones are touching? You have arthritis. Bones help expand. If we were a marquee tent and the bones, the poles, the bones are expanding and stretching out our wetsuit of fascia and muscle, but the bones aren't stacked in a way that hold us up. They create tension and compression. The fascia and the bones and the muscles are creating tension, compression, and suspension to, I'm going to use another analogy, if we were a wetsuit, to expand our wetsuit of our skin. So fascia is connecting everything. It's connecting from your toes to your nose. There's tiny spindles of fascia, like very small, like holding capillaries and nerves in their place. There's sheaths of fascia. There's the fascia just underneath your skin that creates the boundary between the inside and the outside of us. Even woven into the muscles, a muscle group has an encasing of fascia, and then there's the individual muscles, they're wrapped again. And then each individual muscle bundle and then muscle fiber are also wrapped in fascia. So it's so integrated. If a muscle didn't have fascia, there wouldn't be muscle, there would be a pile of red blood cells. And so it's a very amazing material. And of course, it wraps our organs, it holds the nerves, it wraps the nerves, it wraps the arteries and the veins, the tendons and the ligaments are just densified fascia, really. I could go on, but that's a good start. But it's so interrelated, right? So like working on your big toe might have an association with the spleen in your torso because it's linked through an organized fascial chain.
Yeah, I like to picture our entire bodies are covered in like a pantyhose type material, and that's the fascia. But everyone's been paying attention to the corset and like the ribbing of the corset and like all the other details. But the pantyhose, the fascia is what's holding everything up. And what you're explaining is that like there's down to like the minute little thing is covered in this and then connected. And they're discovering, and it's still being discovered, of how what you just said is like something in your toe can be communicating with a different part of your body just through that chain of fascia. It's like a full network. If you think of even like mushroom technology underground and how like the mushrooms communicate with one another, that's what's going on in our bodies. And so traditional Chinese medicine, which is something else you're very passionate about and understand, there's networks of the meridians communicating, but these are bigger, wider channels that cover the entire body, inside, outside, teeny tiny and vast.
That's a beautiful way to say it. And yes, the mycelium network has an analogous thing going on with the fascia. But I do want to talk about that and how fascia transfers forces and distributes forces, aka communication. But first, let's go back to your visual of pantyhose, because another visual is if we took out all of Kat's tissues, bones, muscles, organs, everything. We took everything out. We slurped it out of her. And all that was left was the fascia. A ghost-like replica of Kat would be standing there with all these interweaving spiderweb looking like parts, sheaths, like silk sheaths and little spindles all over her body, because the fascia is something that represents our uniqueness. So we all have a unique fascial signature, and it represents our life. So if Kat had let's say you broke your shoulder when you were 5, we could see a distribution of the fascia adapting to that injury and creating suspension, healing, supportive nature there. If I had like a horribly sprained ankle, however many times from my point shoes, if I had my ghost-like replica of fascia standing there, you could see a thickening of the fascia around my ankle and probably up through my lateral hamstring, which is there to create support as well. That's kind of another visual that people can play with. And I definitely encourage folks to go look at Dr. Jean-Claude Gimberto's video on YouTube. It's just called Scrolling Under the Skin. Really easy to find. And you don't have to watch the whole thing through, but you can really get an idea of what our fascia looks like. It's really this mystical, beautiful, when it's healthy, water-filled fibers, microvacuoles, they're called when they're healthy. I mean, they're called that, but when they're healthy, they are volumized with liquid. So fascia is our liquid distribution system in the body. And because it likes liquid, it also turns out that it's a great transport system for electricity, because we know that fluid or water conducts electricity. And therefore, fascia is a great conductor of forces. And so many anatomists think that the fascia is a distributor of forces, therefore a distributor of messaging or communication. And that the communication as the forces move through your tissues is faster than the speed of light. And then we could take that further, and some people are thinking that this energy or electricity is intelligent energy, aka prana, aka chi, life force, however one might think of it. So it's kind of, that's where the whole mysticism part comes in for me, and the majesty of the body. It's like, oh wow, this material plus intelligent energy or chi is coming together to formulate our bodies, and how they're so intelligent on their own without our mind having to control. So you think of something like the liver operating. The liver knows when to distribute blood into the body because it's housing some blood sometimes, or it's holding about 15 to 20% of our blood. If the heart starts beating super fast, it knows, oh, I'm going to release this blood into the system because it's needed right now. But that message doesn't need to go up to the brain and down to the liver. The liver already knows what's happening with the heart. And so there's all this intelligence happening in the body that we're not maybe aware of. Or I just like to help people get excited about that brilliance. Like, wow, how much magic is that?
Yeah, it just got me excited because I was like, wait, our bodies don't ask our brain permission. Like in a corporate environment of like going up the hierarchical chain of being like, we got to ask the brain if we can do this first. We have to ask the brain if we need to heal. The body has the intelligence to do that. And we all know that. Like we've all gotten a cut and then like the body repairs itself. But we don't think about, well, how did the body know to do this?
Right. I mean, for me, it's got to be that intelligent energy or that chi, that sanctity that we all hold. That's all innate in us. That's my opinion. Of course, some people will just be like, oh, that's the mitochondria, blah, blah, blah. Your DNA is guiding the whole thing. But who's reading the DNA when a baby's forming? What thing is reading the DNA, right? Because the DNA is like the information in the library book. Who's unlocking that? What's unlocking that? Anyways, food for thought.
So that actually brings me to the next topic, which is, so the fascia has been coming up in some of my conversations about the pelvic floor and pelvic floor health. And so when you were speaking about like life force, to me, that is one of the biggest areas of life force energy, is because that's where we create life. And so can we talk a little bit about pelvic floor fascia? Because that kind of connects us to sexual health and pelvic floor pain and what people are experiencing right now and how they can kind of use flossing or just an understanding of their fascia to help with that part of their bodies.
Right. I'll just speak from personal experience and experience working with clients. Maybe I'll start with this story because this is when I was quite young, and in terms of the fascia work I started doing, which I call now fascia flossing. I'll just explain what that is quickly. It's a way to reconfigure the fascial fibers. The fascia is, one of its jobs is to protect. So sometimes it gets dense or hard or plasticky. And so we use this technique of engaging and elongating. And some people will know the word pendiculating. That's how animals move and make their tissues healthy. They contract as they elongate, or they resist as they stretch and move. And for whatever reason, that applying that technique changes the fascia or reconfigures the fibers, or sometimes I say internally exfoliates your connective tissue, which is just more of a visual than actual reality, but you get the idea. I had a client come to me who had such an extreme birth and traumatic birth that the back of her vaginal wall collapsed into her rectum. So she had a 3rd degree tear. And so, of course, there's lots of incontinence, front and back, and she was in extreme pain. They tried to do surgery, it didn't work. And I honestly probably shouldn't have been working on her at the time because I was so it was like maybe a year or two into working on bodies in this way. But for some reason, I just like prayed and asked for guidance. And we did small movements at first and worked on her legs, her pelvis. And over maybe 6 sessions, her pelvic floor healed itself. And the only way I can explain it is that at first when we started working, I could tell there was extraordinary amounts of scar tissue in her adductors, inner thighs, underneath her legs and the hamstrings and the glutes. And as we changed her tissue and made it more elastic and pliable, it increased the potentiality for circulation. Circulation means blood flow. That means nutrients and oxygenation. And those are the things that give the cells the power to heal. And so basically, we created pathways in which healing could happen, working with her body's own intelligent energy, her body's own ability to self-organize and to self-heal. And that was my entryway into pelvic floor work. And then people started coming to me who had vaginismus, people who had pain during sex, incontinence. I wouldn't say I was incontinent myself, but had to pee all the fucking time. Am I allowed to say fucking?
Yeah, you are allowed to say fucking. We're a sex podcast. We're allowed to say fucking, but go ahead.
Okay, so getting my hamstrings worked on, which is the bladder channel of Chinese medicine, I didn't have to pee all the time anymore. I was like, what just happened? And there was a doctor who came in who was very incontinent. Every half an hour he had to go pee because he had a prostate cancer, and they did a discovery medication, injected that into his prostate. It cured the cancer, but it made him incontinent. And he came in with extreme amounts of scar tissue in his hamstrings. He got his hamstrings flossed out. We reconfigured the fascia in his hamstrings. The Chinese medicine folks and the fascia folks who are getting together think that the fascial chain of the hamstring, where the bladder meridian of Chinese medicine runs, are connected. So if you change the fascia of where the meridian runs, because I think that the fascia actually is forming the meridian or the channel in which the qi flows, and that line of fascia goes right up into the bladder. So it's actually interrelated. So we changed the fascia. For whatever reason, it decompressed the bladder or it stopped yanking on the bladder. I don't have an answer for what that is, but I do know that you stopped having to pee all the time. So yeah, fascia can play a huge role in the pelvis. I'm not a pelvic floor expert, I'll just say that. But what seems to be happening is that, especially when our pelvis is very anteriorly tilted, so that means your lower back is a little bit more compressed than if your pelvis was in your personal neutral. And we all need a curve in our lower spine, but some of us get tucked under, some of us get tilted back. And if that's hard to picture, you can imagine just the pelvis tilting forward. You're kind of hovered forward. If you're tilted backwards, then you're in a back bend all the time. Either direction is going to compress and put pressure on the pelvic floor. So what fascia flossing seems to do is help put the pelvis, the tilt of the pelvis, in your personal neutral, whatever that means. And so the undercarriage of the pelvic floor has some space, and that seems to take pressure off of the vaginal canal if people are coming in with a tight pelvic floor without causing more tightening to it. It's more trampoline-y, I guess. A little spring in your step.
A little more buoyant.
Yeah, more buoyant. Thank you. And the other thing that happens is the pelvis can get compressed narrowly from the outer pelvic tissue, because where we tend to densify our fascia, or our body densifies fascia, is on the outsides and the back sides of our body. So if you have outer tight hips, it can smush the pelvis inwards. That's another way that the pelvic floor can, creates compensation or substitution. And whatever your symptoms are showing up there, that can be an underlying cause or a root cause. So if someone came to me with pelvic floor stuff, I would look at the outer hip, the back of the leg, where that distribution of fascia is coming up into the pelvis. I would look at the adductors, see if there's some scar tissue or some tightness there. And then, of course, lower abdominal zone.
So I wanted to, and I'm connecting this for me, hearing you speak about this, and I love that you mentioned people with uteruses as well as people with prostates, because pelvic floor disorders affect all genders, but more so it affects people with uteruses because of birth or prolapse. And so what you explained about your client having, it was postpartum, correct? That then she had a prolapse where her lining of her uterus kind of collapsed and went back into her rectum area, like
It was a tear. It wasn't
a tear.
collapse. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a
Okay.
full-blown tear. So the vaginal wall on the back side links up right with the anus, the anal canal. And so that was split open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard of that. A friend of mine, her younger sister was giving birth and had that exact experience happen as well. It's very common. There's a lot happening during birth. There's a lot of tearing and spreading, and there is prolapse post-birth. But I appreciate that you spoke to both prostates and uterus owners, because it is something that affects people. And what I am looking at too with Head South is aging and the longevity of your sexual relationships. And so oftentimes people accept these types of things that happen within the body. They ignore them at first, or they're ashamed of them. These things start happening and there's a fear of talking about it or addressing it. And so I think practices like fascia work, just working on your hamstrings, as you were speaking about that and the connection, and kind of opening and keeping things more fluid and buoyant, is preventative medicine. So like looking forward and wanting to maintain a healthy sex life, a healthy connection to your body and the intimate areas of your body, sometimes requires preventative work and like working with the body before these things start showing up, before prostate cancer shows up, or before incontinence shows up, or like frequency to urinate. And so that's kind of where I've been connecting the fascia, like the work that you're doing and connecting it to pelvic floor work. And yes, these are ways to provide therapy for people who have had pain or disorders, but it's also, whether you have it or not, it's such a beautiful thing to practice just for longevity. And so that's where I wanted to bring up Free the Pelvis and that work that you're doing, because I think that whether you're experiencing like pelvic floor work, you can see a pelvic floor PT therapist, people who are specifically trained in that part of the body. But this kind of work that you're doing is like universal for anybody who has a pelvic bowl, a pelvis, and all of the things that are contained in it. So can we talk a little bit about Free the Pelvis and that kind of work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, everybody has a pelvic floor. If you have a torso and hips, you have a pelvic floor. So whether you're a prostate or a uterus owner, absolutely. Yes, sometimes pelvic floor work can distribute through uterus owning bodies because our sex organs are inside of us. And I'm saying you and I because we identify as such. But if your reproductive organs are inside your pelvis, there's a lot more pressure and more space is being taken up than if you are a penis owner and your reproductive organs are outside of your body. So yeah, that can tend to land in that population. But Free the Pelvis came about. Oh my gosh, how did it come about? I think I was teaching a class and I just kept screaming, free the pelvis, free your pelvis. And one of my students was like, oh my gosh, you should keep that. That's like a very important thing to be working on. And so I was like, yeah, let's do a whole month of educating about the pelvis, because you're so right that no one's holding our hand in learning about our pelvi, our pelvises. It's kind of a dark space. And even like maybe when you close your eyes and you can imagine your heart or your lungs, it's harder to kind of connect lower down just from growing up in this patriarchal culture, right? This is something that we are taught to be ashamed of. There's even a nerve, the pudendal nerve, that is named for the space of shame. So one of our sex nerves in our body that gives feedback to the brain to release dopamine and oxytocin and all the good, wonderful, pleasureful hormones, that name was named as the place of shame. So it's very inherent in our anatomical culture as well as our greater culture beyond. And I just wanted people to get excited about the magic, like you mentioned, the space of where we have the most concentrated life force, where we create life. It should be celebrated. And we all deserve the right to have a healthy pelvis. And when we think globally, many people are removed of that right. And I'm getting a little teary right now because it's not okay. And so first step is to educate people about their own bodies, and then hopefully that distributes out and impacts other places in the world, or, helps us get into an outreach sense of mind. The thing is that female bodies in particular, or female anatomy, I should say, has been understudied, just like the fascia in a way. I read Vagina Obscura last winter or spring, actually. It was just about this time of year. And I had already started planning Free the Pelvis, and it was amazing timing. Everyone needs to read this book by Rachel Gross. And the premise of the book is that the female anatomy has been understudied, and she had a severe bacterial infection going on. Remind me, what's the name of?
Bacterial vaginosis.
Thank you. Praise you. I was like slipping my mind right now. And she was like, this cannot be that complicated of a problem. And the only reason my doctors can't cure this is because this type of thing hasn't been studied enough. And I guess I'm here doing Free the Pelvis, a month of education and movement around the pelvis, because I just want people to have more access to that part of their body. And we'll be doing some fundraising. We'll be teaching a movement class together. I'll teach fascia flossing. Kat's going to do some restorative leading. and it'll be focused on the pelvis. And again, you don't have to be a vagina owner to enjoy freeing your pelvis, for sure. We're going to have a panel of experts talking about how important it is to have a healthy pelvis and how to have a healthy pelvis, because it's a mystery, right? Well, lots of people don't even know what pelvic floor PT is. Like you mentioned, such an amazing thing to do for yourself, whether you think you have a healthy pelvis or not. Like we might have tighter pelvic floors or too loose of pelvic floors, and we didn't even know because we weren't told or taught to consider that. We're really just generating awareness around how to have a healthy pelvis and what does that mean, and like really uplifting this idea that everyone deserves to have a healthy pelvis.
And people can find information on your Instagram and Head South's Instagram for Free the Pelvis. So do you want to share your Instagram handle?
Oh, sure. At Fascia Department. So fascia is spelled Fascia Department. You can also follow me, Bonzi, Bonszy.
And then let's talk about how fascia work has improved your sex life.
Oh, okay. Fun. Well, let's see. It was kind of amazing timing that I met a partner as I was kind of deepening into receiving a lot of hands-on fascia flossing for myself back when I was in Santa Barbara at the stretching studio. I was getting a lot of work done on me, which was a huge developmental earthquaking shift. And so I didn't even like think how that would impact my pelvic floor, except that I was peeing less, seemed good. Also, like running, like if I sneeze, like didn't pee a little bit, like sometimes we do, even if we haven't had a child yet, taking the shame away from that as well for everybody. I had a partner at the time who was more sexually available for exploration, and he entered me into realizing that I could have extended orgasms and multiple orgasms, and I'd never experienced that in my life. So I can't 100% tell you that it's from the fascial work because of the timing, because it might have just been an access point in that moment in my life. But I'm pretty sure that changing the fascial network in my body has given me more availability for chi flow. It's that simple. The blood flow and the intelligent energy can flow smoothly, efficiently in my body, more so than it was beforehand. And so I have to say, my orgasmic capabilities have gone through the roof from that. And also just changing my fascia has helped me appreciate my body more, and living in that kind of embodiment and sovereignty, standing within myself and kind of linking with my own sexuality has helped me with my sex life too. Not just connecting to my physical sensations myself, but also feeling grounded to link deeply with a partner.
Being empowered with information too. So not just like working on the body. So your physical body is being worked on and opening up, and that just being embodied and understanding your body feels amazing. But then also being empowered with the information about your body allows you to experience pleasure. So like information plus experience and like feeling good and not feeling restricted and tight. Like when your body's open and available, you're able to meet with a partner who is also open and available, and you can connect in that way, but your mind is also there. I think then that takes the level of sex beyond just the physical two bodies having sex and brings it to more of a spiritual, connective openness space. Like it's expansive. It creates an expansiveness from that grounding, whether it's through fascia flossing or just like knowing your body or working on your mind and working on how you're viewing things. All of these things, the mind, the emotions, the physical body, all of these layers are interconnected with sexuality. And so being able to tap into those, refine those, and have a partner or partners also willing to do that work and also open to exploring in that way is absolutely a way to enlighten your sexuality, like enlighten your experience with sex and open it up a bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah, that self-knowing leads to an ownership, and then that ownership, I think, opens you up to a level of comfort, and that comfort can lead to an exchange with another person on a deeper level. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like a full-bodied experience of an embodiment of pleasure. Everything about it, like eating something that's very pleasurable and not just tasting it, but like really being present in that moment. And the body's willing to receive it and open to that. And I think that's all of those things connected to, like, I absolutely believe your sex life improved practicing and doing resistant stretching, fascia flossing. I think the connection to empowering your mind too is important for people. I think having a deeper knowledge of our bodies and how they function and work.
Well, if you believe that your body is amazing, and even when our bodies aren't doing everything we want them to do, because that will maybe never happen, but there's still an inherent majesty and intelligence if you believe your body is that incredible and that it's a facilitator for experiencing pleasure, then absolutely your access point opens up to grander scales. Yeah. So I that's a prayer I have for everyone, is to just tap in, even if it's like one tiny thing about your body for a brief moment, like, oh, how fucking cool is my body? 100 trillion cells coming together, linked up by a divine life force to create my experience for me. And a planet that gives us enough oxygen and water in which we can also have that experience. So, how did those two things come together? Like, blows my mind all the time. And if we drop back in that outstandingness, that awe factor, it's like, oh yeah, I want to tap into that, because that is the essence of life. Right? We got a little Taoist there, got a little like macrocosm and microcosm, but really all those things coming together so that we can have an experience. And like, yes, I think that our spirits can separate and we have something beyond this lifetime. But on this planet, in this moment, I'm going to be as embodied as possible, being in the pleasure and pain of my life and feeling it to the fullest, because that's what my life contract is to fully experience as much as I can. Sometimes we have to escape though, right? Sometimes we want to jump out of our bodies, and also I want to honor that for people, because I experience that too.
Absolutely. That's how I felt Monday. I was like, I'm ready to be out of this body. I can't, I'm like not okay, but that's the human experience, right? It's just what happens. And it's beautiful, all of it. The lightness, the heaviness, all of it is really magical, actually. I love how your outlook, your perception of life, your experience of life is very mystical with awe and reverence for it. I really, truly appreciate that so much, Bon.
Thank you. Yeah, we're little sacred beings, aren't we? Just bopping around, bumping into each other.
Bumping into each other all day, all night. I truly appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom. And I think this is a great place to wrap up. And I wanted to thank you. And I wanted you to share also your website so people can find you, because you offer these classes online. So you offer not just like pelvic floor work, but it goes way beyond that. And you work on the entire body. And so you offer online classes. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your website, talking a little bit about the Floss.
Yeah, thefloss.com is where you can find me, no spaces. And there's a virtual on-demand library with hundreds of videos where you can learn how to fascia floss and change your fascia for the better. And then if you become a member, you get access to that library, as well as taking a couple virtual classes with me live on Zoom twice a week, plus lots of other goodies come with that. So yeah, encourage people to sign up, become a member. Maybe we'll put a discount code link in the show notes for everybody so they can give that a try. And yeah, people say it's life changing, and I really hope that it is. So
It's so fascinating to learn about it and learn about like what you were saying of like if you can move and manipulate the hamstrings, for example, it can have potential to support the pelvic floor and other areas of the body within that channel. Working on one area can open up and relieve pain, tension, restriction in other parts of the body. And I've experienced it in person. I've experienced it online. I do it in my morning practice every day. There's certain areas, especially the shoulders, because that's where I hold a lot of my tension. I do a lot of the stretches every day. And so it's definitely life-changing and body-changing.
It's so awesome. I'm so glad it helped you too. I love it. Yeah.
Yay! And that's a wrap.
We didn't do fun questions at the end.
We can add it in if you want to add in. What was your favorite sex scene from a movie?
Ooh, what was my favorite sex scene from a movie? I'm such a helpless romantic. I mean, the first thing that pops into my head is Shakespeare in Love with Gwyneth Paltrow. And she's like the guy, she's playing the part of a guy, and like her boobs are tied up in this really long cloth, and I don't even remember the name of the guy actor. He unravels her and she spins and spins and spins and spins. Like that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But also like 1994 Romeo and Juliet with Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio. Romeo DiCaprio. That's funny.
And then speaking of, because Leonardo DiCaprio was definitely one of my childhood crushes, who were your childhood crushes or like teen crushes?
Oh my God. I didn't have a crush until I was 12, but it was Taylor of Hanson. Isn't that awful?
No, because he was absolutely on my walls in my bedroom for sure. That like Hanson, but Taylor specifically, like from 7th grade on, was definitely a moment.
Okay, Bop fans over here for sure.
I'm glad I just learned that about you.
I mean, I am cisgendered, but like I feel like more women actresses impacted me more. Like I didn't have crushes on celebrity men. I'm way too practical. I'm like, I'll never get to connect with them.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're like, yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow, but I don't remember the other guy's name.
Forget him. I don't know. Like Salma Hayek and Penelope Cruz.
Oh my God. Same.
Yeah.
Actually, same crushes on those women for sure. Penelope Cruz, like always. Like I think when she's going to be like 90, I'm still going to have a crush on Penelope Cruz.
Seriously. She's so gorgeous.
So gorgeous. And then what was your sex education like?
Oh, wow. We had terrible sex education in my 6th grade class. All I can remember is that it was like awful, and I felt even more lost than when we had it. But luckily, in junior high, I like got inserted into this group of young women. They were like my best friend circles. They're still my best friends. We're still like close knit and in touch, and I'm so grateful for them because a couple of them had moms that were like, let's educate these. One was a professor at UCSB who was a professor of women's studies. So she was passing us books like a lesbian love novel for teenagers. And we got a book like Learn About Your Bodies, like young teenage I don't know. We were just it was a very unique situation where we're all helping to educate each other. And I have to say, I was more of the receiver than a giver of education at that time. But it was so impactful. And we were doing things like doing rape crisis training and domestic violence training at age 16. Like we were in a group called Peer Advocates where we'd like talk about sex education openly. And I mean, I have to say, insanely grateful for all those things because I was like, we kind of talked about it in my family. My mom was like good if I asked a question, and she taught me early what sex was, but I don't know. That was a space in which I could really be curious. So I'm very grateful for that. It was unique. Yeah, special.
That's really unique. I love that. I think it's a great framework, for you personally in your experience of sex and how you engage and interact with sex. But also, I think it was a great framework for how you live in the world now, like as an educator, as someone who wants to share knowledge and wisdom about the body and creating safe space. So it's amazing to see that, like, I can connect that as your friend and see like, oh, that early experience and that exposure to women supporting women, humans supporting humans around giving them information to empower them is the work that you're doing now, 20 years later.
Amazing how it all comes together, right? So empowering and gave me a voice, and there was a lot of body positivity. Like we were all different shapes and sizes, and we would streak. We were naked. We take naked pictures of each other. Like also, this is a funny one. On our graduation caps, we all took a letter of vagina and like hid it. Like mine was I because I was going to UC Irvine. Someone, I don't know, Carrie's was V, and she was like, I don't know, it just means fuck my dad. Like, okay, whatever. But anyways, we all like kind of disguised it, but then you put them all together and it spelled out vagina. So that was our vibe.
I love that.
Pretty funny. But like, vagina's not really the word. It's vulva. That's what we were actually talking about. I just thought of nerdy anatomy stuff. But anyways.
Well, it's great to know that like this is how you've always been.
Yeah, I'm not making some shit up right now all of a sudden.
No, you have been an anatomy nerd and a dance lover since you came out.
A vulva lover. Yeah.
Cool. So that's it.
Great.
Thank you so much. That was so fun.
So fun.
Special thanks to all of our guests. Head South is hosted by Kat Meyer, produced by Isis Barlow, edited by Megan Hook, with music by Lily Rezi Rothman, graphics by Ella Chodos Irvine, cover art by Gina Ship Casey, and intro by Murph Meyer.